Started. Awesome. Good morning and hello, everyone, and welcome to our training. We are going over some tips and techniques this morning around using observation for program improvement. And one thing that you're going to get from this time together and from this session is that I will not offer you too many tools. There are quite a bit of tools out there that I can provide you guys in a follow-up email that you can have access to. But for the purpose of this session and time together, we're going to talk about the importance of seeing with our eyes, listening with our ears, and all the tips and techniques that involves looking at not just the youth that you engage with, but also looking at your staff and looking at the total environment as a whole. And so there are going to be around 4 different observation strategies and techniques that we're actually going to cover. So going back to the actual welcome, once again, welcome. I am Sonia Hall with the Michigan After School Partnership. I know that you may have been expecting another facilitator this morning. She has since taken another position. We congratulate her. You may see her in other trainings in the future. So I am stepping in and grateful and glad to be stepping in for her. I have been in the out of school time space now for well over 10 years, education 25 plus years, and have had my fair share of observations and everything around the PQA part of observations, from the Weicker Center to high scopes, which, if you know anything about PQA, PQA was built off of the high scopes framework, which is still being used in the pre-K world today. So our goal together is to explore how we can use observation to identify the strengths and opportunities in our programs, in our classrooms, and then to take that information and translate that into steps that are actionable and for improvements. And like I said, I know you come from the 21st century side of things, that we use a lot of PQA, and with that we have score sheets and documents, and then we take those and translate that into what we call the program improvement plan. And that is one tool that can be used. There are so many others out there. But once again, for the purpose of this training, we're just going to have some authentic, organic conversations around the importance of listening, the importance of looking, the importance of not being objective when we are observing and assessing our youth, our staff, and the entire program. So throughout this session, you'll engage in some hands-on activities. You're going to watch a video from one of my favorite shows, Abbott Elementary. If you're not up on that show, I suggest you go back to their first season on YouTube or Netflix and just check it out. I absolutely love Abbott Elementary. So we're going to use just a video clip from that show when we get to the point where we need to just go ahead and do an observation. And then we're going to collaborate. So we're going to have 2 breakout sessions, guys, that you're going to work with your peers in and collaborate to build meaningful and action plans, or get an idea, should I say, on how to take that information and create an action plan. It's not going to be as in-depth as what you may do with a program improvement plan. And from this point on, I'll call it a PIP. So what you may do with a PIP, this one is not going to be as in-depth, because once again, remember, this training is not about providing you with tools and a plethora of resources. This is really about getting you to understand the importance of structured observations, unstructured observations, and what all that looks like. So we will have time to engage with peers through this. So going to our land acknowledgement at the Michigan After School Partnership, we are all about being inclusive and understanding about acknowledging those who were here before us. So I'm going to ask for a few brave folks to come off mute and to read our land acknowledgement. I can get it started off. I'll read the first one to warm the room up. And then if you have, if you would love to read the following bulleted points, please feel free to come off mute and go ahead and read after me. So the first one of our land acknowledgement, we want to acknowledge our current experiences in two pandemics respectfully, and that people have stewarded the land we occupy throughout the generations. New takers.
Every community owes its existence and vitality to generations from around the world who contributed their hopes, dreams, and energy to making the history that led to this moment.
Thank you, Larry. Any others?
I can go. Some were brought here against their will. Some were drawn to leave their distant homes in the hope of a better life. And some have lived on this land for more generations than can be counted.
Thank you so much for coming off mute. Any others?
I can do the next.
Mhm.
Truth and acknowledgement are critical to building mutual respect and connection across all barriers of heritage and differences. We begin this effort to acknowledge what has been buried by honoring the truth.
Thank you so much. And I'm going to take over the last few. If any others wanted to come off mute, I acknowledge you from the heart and I thank you. But I'm going to move us along through this slide. We are standing on the ancestral lands of the Adawa people nation. We respect their elders, past and present. Please take a moment to consider the many legacies of violence, displacement, migration, and settlement that bring us together here today. And please join us in uncovering such truths at any public events. I thank you all so much for those that came off mute. I appreciate you greatly. Awesome. Moving on to our objectives this morning, we're going to understand how observations support continuous quality improvement. We're going to explore various observation techniques. I kind of mentioned a few of them in the beginning to capture valuable data. We're going to practice real-time observations using the video. And then we're going to collaborate in those breakout sessions with peers to reflect and develop an action plan. The observation techniques that I mentioned earlier, just a little discussion around each one of them. So I have them all here listed, but I'm going to pop each one out and give a little bit more explanation on each technique that can be used in observation. We have the structured observation. This involves using a checklist, pretty much similar to what you may do with PQA or high scopes. There's a rubric that you may see being used in the structured observation. And it's helpful to use something like this when looking for a very specific behavior or outcome. Because as you know, and I'll reference again with the program quality improvement cycle that the Weicker Center models is that there are different rubrics and sections to the tool, and they're looking for very specific things that answer to that that leading indicator or of that report. So that will be very, very structured. You have a checklist that you're looking for. You have a scoring that you're providing. That is a very structured observation. You may even see it if you've ever been a classroom teacher where the Danielson framework is being used, and they have the different quadrants that they have to answer to, and it's very structured. When that principal comes into that classroom to observe that teacher and the students, they're looking for something very specific. It's very structured. The unstructured observation, now this technique allows you to observe naturally. Anything that's occurring naturally in the atmosphere. You don't have a pen and paper with you. You're not in there looking for a specific thing. You're just in the classroom. You could have been dropping something off, and your eyes of observation. And that's what I want you guys to get in this session today, is that as an educator, and every single person who deals with youth. I call them educators, youth development advocates. That's who we are. And our lens of observation, our eyes are fine-tuned, our ears are fine-tuned. I can say that when I became a parent, my ears perked up a little bit extra, my eyes zoomed in a little bit more, and I began to observe my surroundings, even because now I have these lovely young people in my life that I'm responsible for every day. Did they eat? Did they get safely from place to place? And that's how we are when we become educators. Something about us changes. Our senses pick up, and we do have to fine tune them every now and then. And that is when we become observation specialists, is what I call us as well. So when you are in that unstructured space, you're not going in there looking for anything specific. You could be, like I said, simply just going in, dropping something off, but your ears and eyes perk up when you hear and see certain things. And this unstructured observation is when you could take the opportunity to take just mental notes, to go back to your office and write it down, what you may have seen that you may want to address at a staff meeting, what you may want to address to that person one-on-one. But taking those open-ended notes without a predefined structure is your unstructured observation. And then focus observation. That's when you have, there's like nothing specific at all. Here you have zero specific areas that you're trying to answer to. And then the objective observation is, I want you guys to really remember this one as we go throughout the rest of this session, when the video comes up and you guys are observing, and then beyond this session as well, is that the objective observation, that is critical, because you need to stick to what you see and to avoid any type of interpretation, bringing your thoughts or your feelings into it. Do not make any type of assumptions of intent at all when you are doing the objective observation. And like I said, we're going to pop each one of these out and just kind of talk about them, just give it a little bit of an example before we get into watching the video. So once again, the structured observation, it follows a predetermined framework. There's a checklist involved. Remember, there's a rubric that's going to be involved. You go in with a clear focus in your mind of what you're going to look for, what it is that you are going to observe. When we do the PQA, and when the teacher once again uses that Danielson framework, they're pulling out, for example, let's just talk about PQA right now. So let's just say we're going in for that day and we're just going to look at safety, right? And so we're making sure that they have their first aid kit. We're making sure that they have their emergency preparedness plan hanging up where they can grab it. We're making sure that they have the fire extinguisher, that there are at least sprinklers going on in the area that the kids are in. There's so much that we're thinking about just around safety, and we're checking off. Yes, I see this. Yes, that's present. And then we get to score that later on and say, okay, now we're going to use a 1-3-5 scoring according to the PQA tool on, the effectiveness or were these things actually present. So that's a very structured, predetermined framework, right? So one of the examples here, is imagine you're observing a program that's working on promoting youth voice. You might use a checklist to also track how many times students are given a chance to express their opinions. Did the teacher shut them down? Was their hand raised for more than a couple of seconds and never acknowledged? So you're looking for that as well. And you can also count that. I do believe in the high scopes, there's a number, how many times did the student raise their hand and they were not acknowledged? So I saw that happen twice during my observation in that particular space. Another example is how many questions are student initiated versus teacher directed. We want student, and this example here is around youth voice. So if it's always teacher directed, is that youth voice? We would say no, it is not. If it's something where the teacher is always giving their voice, they're interrupting, they're never allowing that student to participate and give their voice, we can say, well, you know, that student really never had a chance to initiate the conversation, finish the conversation, and in that structured tool, we're counting, oh, we saw this happen more than one time. So that is the structured part of the observation. Now, that is the first of the 4 techniques that we're going to cover. Moving into our second technique here is unstructured observation, according to the list that I provided earlier. Now, this technique, once again, is it allows you to observe naturally. Whatever is happening in that space, you can naturally observe it. You're not going in there with this pre-planned focus. You don't have the safety portion of the PQA tool in your hand, and you're not checking it off, and you're not doing the counting. You, at this point, could just simply just write open-ended notes. You're just offering of information in your notes. You're writing down the evidence that you see. Very, very unstructured, but you are taking down notes. I used to take sticky notes with me every place I went, in every classroom, every day. I had my pen and I had my sticky notes. And in case I saw something during supper time, dinner time, throughout the day, during the transition, you know, just in case I saw something, I was ready to write it down. So this technique captures the full organic flow of the day, the flow of the activity that you're actually observing. And it's very useful when you're exploring the dynamics of the relationships between student and student, but between student and staff, and between staff and staff as well. I would encourage you that when you are in your space and you are observing, that you look at everything, not just how the teacher and the student relationship is going, but the student to student, peer to peer, and that staff to staff as well. It is important. We are looking from such a great lens when we become, you know, over our program directors, or if we're site directors. We have to really open up how we're seeing and how we're envisioning and viewing things. And we have to be so fine-tuned that we are looking at all of those relationships. We are looking at the student to student. We are looking at the teacher to student. We are looking at the staff to staff relationships. So examples here, let's say you're observing an open play session, right? With an unstructured observation, you might notice which students naturally navigate to each other, which students are your born leaders. They take that leadership role on without having to be asked. I get that. I have my colleagues know that I take care of my twin grandsons every other weekend, and they are 4 years old. So they just started preschool. And so they have this thing where they want to be leaders in everything. And if they don't get that opportunity, something in their world just goes off. It's not good. So even when they're here with me, I make line leaders. Who's the line leader for upstairs and who's the line leader for downstairs? But they are both honestly natural born leaders. But you need to be able to observe that in your space. Who's taking that initiative to be that leader? You're looking at how staff intervene when there's a conflict. We know that we are looking for, you know, ways to resolve conflicts. If you've been taught through that Weicker Center model, once again, referencing that, you would know that there's a whole training on how to resolve conflicts, right? But the intervene part, you can know all day long what it means or what you should do when it comes down to a conflict. But are they actually taking the steps to intervene, and how are they actually doing that? That's another point. So the unstructured observations give a rich narrative. So once again, you are taking those notes down. We call them anecdotal evidence. So you are writing exactly what you see at that point. You are not trying to solve anything. You're not trying to bring a solution, not then and there. At that point, you are simply just writing it down so that you can take it back to yourself and look it over, take it back to your team, have the conversations about it. So that is the second technique, unstructured observation. So the focused observation technique, here there is zero specific areas that you are trying to get answers to or focus in on. So such as a student engagement or peer interaction, while you're just focusing on very specific interactions, individuals or moments. So you're doing that rather than observing everything. For example, here you might focus on a new staff member in this example very clearly. So how a new staff member interacts with students during the first 10 minutes of a session. We all know that the first 10 minutes of a session of the day, when those students come to us in that out of school time atmosphere, we know the first 10 minutes of that interaction between the teacher and the student is crucial. How I had my staff standing at the door. It was something that was known in my program that when that bell rings, end of day, this is your assignment. You are at the door, you are greeting the students, because now you get a sense of how are they coming into the classroom. You get to ask questions like, how was your day? Anything I should know about? You get to start the conversation right then and there. So in this focus observation example, just looking at new staff, the first 10 minutes, not throughout the entire hour, you're just pulling out just small time segments of what you're looking to see happen. And then you can go back and address that in a staff meeting as like, these are the expectations. Hey, kudos, I saw you guys doing this. And I would always encourage you guys to give kudos. If you're seeing something being done good with your staff and how they're interacting, not just with the student, but with each other in that staff to staff relationship, give kudos. There's nothing wrong with doing that. But for this focus observation, you can pull out small amounts of time of what you're looking at. So focus observation helps when you need detailed data on a specific element, whether it's your student, staff member, or key moment during an activity. That was their third technique. Moving into the fourth technique, objective observation. Now remember, this is where it's critical to stick to what you see and to avoid interpreting behaviors or assuming intent. No assumptions or judgments are to be done during this time or at all through any of the observations. Just the facts should be written down. When you are writing down your evidence, write down just the facts, just what you see, what's happening, who's doing what, and how they're interacting. The who's doing what, I will be very careful. I always used initials. I never used, especially the names of my students. I never used their names in documentation. I would use student H or student A or give their first and last name initials in my responses and what I was writing down, should I say. And so once again, I'm going to stress no assumptions or judgments about intentions. So instead of saying, for example, the students seemed bored, this example here says, you might say, 3 students were slouched in their seats with their heads resting on their arms. Now that just took everything from, oh, they just seemed bored. They were not into what the lesson was and all that. Just write what you see. They were slouched. They were just laying down. They were looking in the opposite direction. They were not focused in. So this shift from interpretation to observation. So you're not interpreting anything. You are literally just observing. as youth development advocates, as out of school time educators, we have to fine tune these techniques, fine tune these skills, that when we walk in, we are not bringing in judgment. We are just looking to see what is going on, observing the room. And when we get to the video that we're going to look at, I'm going to ask you to look at each one of these techniques and to bring them into that video observation and write to that. So you will need a pen, you will need paper. My colleague Larry is going to drop some information into the chat box, because the next shift that we're going to go into is taking these techniques into a video that I'm going to show you. Now, I want to go back and say this again. This shift was from interpretation to observation, makes your data more reliable and actionable. You will find it amazingly surprising how well you could begin to write the action plan, begin to write the program improvement plan if you're using those. When you actually have written down notes that aren't about judgment, you're writing down what you've seen, you've removed the personal bias, all of that, you're writing down what you have observed. They're slouching, they're bored. You know, you're not going to say that, I'm sorry, they're looking the other direction, and things of that nature. So when you begin to write these things down, now your action plan is going to become more robust, is going to become one where you can begin to have those open conversations with your staff. Because I always encourage, whenever you do observe, whenever you do an observation, you need to take it back to your staff and have the conversations around. And even in that space, let me say this is not, it should never be punitive. It should never be judgment-based. This is bringing this to a group of educators, your colleagues, your peers in the work, your team, and you're having the conversations on how do we improve this? What are the action steps that we're going to do? And we're going to talk about what those action steps should look like, because as you know, they should be measurable, right? When you're writing them. And so we're going to touch on that just a little bit on today as well. So moving on, just a few things before we get to the video. When you are doing the observations, there are times that you can bring in more than just yourself. Youth, it is important to involve your youth in observations as well. Train them on the PQA tool. If you're using SEL PQA, if you're using the youth or the school age, whatever you're using in your program, find some youth, some young people, and bring them in and train them on what it looks like to observe, what it means to observe. Get their voice involved in on that as well. Your staff, most definitely, along with program directors, all the staff of that program should be involved in observing. I used to give my staff different sections. I would take safety, and then they would take another area of the tool, and then we would use sticky notes and we would observe at different areas and times throughout the actual day or week or activity. So my staff was fully involved when it came down to observing my space. Families, bring in your parents. Sometimes you will be surprised that parents are sometimes waiting to be invited in to your program, to get them involved, not just during lights on or not just during the times where something's gone wrong in your program, but sometimes parents really do want to know what their students are learning in that after school space as well as during the day school. So invite your families in, train them on the tool as well. Your community, getting them involved. Let me tell you, this opens up so many windows of opportunity when you begin to bring that community in, and they can sit on that advisory board. So if you don't have an advisory board right now in your program, I would encourage you to get one, because when you consider some of our grants in a year, some of them in 5 years, you're trying to get funding in. it is going to be important that you have folks from your community sitting in on your program, understanding what you're doing, how you are working to build that high quality program so that you can ask for sustainable funds or sustainable resources to assist your program to stay alive. So bringing them into the process of observation and looking at that data, because as you know, this is a data piece. I'm a huge data person, not just quantitative. I'm looking at that qualitative aspect as well. And then building those relationships around that. That's hugely important. So consider this just a little tidbit there as we move into looking at our observations. But this was mentioned because I want you guys to understand who should be on the team when you're talking about using observation and doing it effectively in your program. So now moving on into the video. So Larry dropped into the chat box some forms for you guys. In those forms, and I said earlier, you're going to need a pen, you're going to need paper. So what I want you guys to use is not just the structured and unstructured techniques. Every single technique that I mentioned, I want you in this short span of time to bring all 4 of those techniques into this video. Now, I'm not going to play the full video, and I'm doing that for a reason. I'm going to play it up to a certain point, and you'll see why later on. But while you're looking at this, I want you to take down the notes. Use all the documents that was given to you. And then we're going to put you in a breakout room after this video and assign different roles for you guys as far as being a reporter, a facilitator, a note taker, things like that. But we'll get to that in a minute. I want you guys to, if you have the form that actually has the 4 techniques listed on them, take a moment to look at that. And then take a moment to also pull up that observation tool that just kind of lists out how many times you see this happening. And not the action plan right now. We're not worried about that one out of the documents that was given to you guys. But I want you to look at the 4 techniques. I want you guys to look at I think it might be the structured one. I'm not for sure. I just want to be clear. So give me a moment. Yep, you may want to look at that one, but I still want you to pull in all 4. So that is going to require you guys to take notes. So you should have the structured observation checklist. That is where you can go ahead and you can put down the number. And if I need to play this video more than one time, please feel free to put that in the chat box, and my colleague Larry will let me know if we need to play it again. In this video, during this video observation, I'm also going to ask you guys if you can pull into the and make use of the observation notes. That template right there, I want you guys to use that. You can put the date and all the times and things, but then the interactions that you observe. And once again, this may take us looking at this video, this cycle, this portion of it, maybe twice. We'll see. You guys may be spot on and be amazing note takers. I believe that you are. So those 2 you can bring into the space with you and use the bottom portion of the observation notes template. If you can use the bottom portion of it just to note down the techniques that you made use of during this observation. If we are clear, let's see if we can get a thumbs up if we are clear on those directions. There's more clarity needed. Please feel free to come off mute and we can help you through that. Hearing none, are we good to go, Larry?
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you, Larry, so much. I appreciate you. My view is limited, so I thank you for your grace. All right. Please let me know, Larry, as soon as I play, if you can hear this or not. We may need to shift to another option if the audio is not being heard. Hitting play now. taking a moment, and I'm hoping an ad doesn't come up. If it does, my apologies. Perfect.
Okay, now does anybody remember what was in this container before? Aaron, go for it. Except iceberg. Now, there was an ice cube in this container before, right? Michael, why are you yelling in my class? Is your mom here right now? Mr. Eddie, you silly. So there was an ice cube in here before, but now there's just water. What do we think happened to that ice cube? I love bingo. This isn't the first time Micah has disrupted my class. From what I understand, he's obsessed with a TV show about Australian dogs. Bluish or something. I don't know. It doesn't matter. What matters is I've tried everything to keep him in line and nothing works. It's gotten to the point where even his classmates are annoyed. Do you know how hard it is to annoy a first grader? Bingo! 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 Everybody, eyes up here, right? Bluey. The show is called Bluey. And rain is an example of water in its liquid state. Bluey is from down under. Micah, if you keep distracting your classmates, you're going to leave me with no other choice but to send you to the principal's office. Now, we already know that ice is a solid, but water is a... Have you ever been down under? Micah, I didn't want to have to do this, but you're leaving me with no choice. Gather your things. You're going to see Principal Coleman. Now, Ice Cube.
Okay, so I'm stopping the video right there. Do I need to play it again for you guys before we move into our breakout session? Okay, hearing none. Remember, we're going to take the 4 techniques that we just talked about, that was just covered, and we are going to take them into our breakout session together. While in that breakout room, and you're taking on your notes, so every single piece of evidence, every note that you've taken, you're also taking that with you into the space. Well, while we're in there together, we're going to break that into different roles. And I'm going to pass that. Trying to play again, guys. So here's how the breakout room is going to be organized. We're going to have a facilitator. That person is going to not only lead the conversation, but keep the group on task and ensures that everyone is contributing to the conversation. The note taker is going to capture and record the main insights from each individual observation from that whole and from the group discussion as a whole. The reporter is then going to come back when we come back together, and they're going to share the findings, the insights when they return to the main room. So some of the discussion prompts is that we have here are, I want you guys to consider, and there's also a form that was given to you in the chat box that lists what is going on in breakout 1. So all of this will be going with you, each person. Hopefully you guys downloaded that and you have them with you when you go into the breakout room. So we're going to ask you guys to look at what behaviors and interactions stood out. Remember, I said the interactions are not just between the student and student or the teacher and the student, but it's between 3 different buckets. So although I know this was just Mr. Gregory's classroom, there were no other adults in the room. I just want you guys to focus on that teacher to student and student to student engagement. The other prompt is, how did the environment shape what you observed? And what adjustments would you recommend based on your observations? So we are going to put you into breakout rooms. And when you see that pop up, make sure that you have with you pen, paper, and all of the forms for the part 1 of the breakout, the observation tools, and the techniques so that you can make use of those. You're going to be in that breakout room for maybe about 8 to 10 minutes to get in there and look at that again and to observe it. If you need me, and I don't know if I'm able to do that, if you need to come back to the space to see the video again, to the main room, feel free to do that and we can make sure that happens for you. But this is based off of your individual notes that you also took, having that conversation into that full group discussion, and then taking notes. So once you get into that breakout room, please find out who is going to be the facilitator, who's the note taker, and who's the reporter. So it should be maybe 3 or 4 of you guys in a breakout room for about 8 to 10 minutes. All right. I am going to. How's it going, Larry? Do you have them in? Are they going in?
Yep, I'm gonna get started in just a second. There was a request for me to resend the files because someone had to log off and log back on.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. So I'm going to keep this slide up here. Once again, these are the directions for the breakout room.
All right, I have the rooms ready. So whenever you're ready for me to put them in.
Yep, ready. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yep.
All right, guys, when you see that room pop up, go ahead and join your room. Very good. Room 2. Very good. I think we have one more for 1. Let's see. Hi, Lynn. Do you need us to help you get? Welcome back. Welcome back, guys. Awesome. Welcome back. Welcome back. Very good. Welcome back. Welcome back. All right. Welcome back. Welcome back. Awesome. Do believe we have everyone back now. Thank you guys for coming back into the space with us. Welcome back, everyone. Welcome back. All right. So before we get started with a few folks giving some updates and talking about what some of the discussion was in your groups. We had 2 breakout rooms, and my colleague who's on with me, assisting me through this training, Larry Manley Jr., informed me that the video was a little choppy. So my apologies for that. Moving forward, he will be taking over the playing of the video so that won't happen. My Wi-Fi is a little unstable on today. I guess it said it made it to Friday and it does not want to go any further than that. But I thank you guys for your grace on that. But when we gather our data, we look and we observe and we see what's going on in a program and during an activity in our space, in our classrooms, that data through observation the next step is to start making sense of that data. The next step is to start making sense of not just the scoring and the rubric data, which is the quantitative piece of it, but also bringing that qualitative piece in it and beginning to make sense of what that data is saying. So you can begin to look for things like patterns, and you're looking for trends that begin to open up and to reveal where your program is excelling and where adjustments are needed. From there, you can identify small. I would never suggest going big or go home. I would never suggest going too broad. Start small, start with very small changes at first, because you have to consider that you're not just making those changes for yourself, you're making those changes for your staff, you're making those changes for students. And so you need to start small on those changes. So when you're making those adjustments, identify those small but meaningful changes you can implement immediately. We do have measurements in when we begin to build out our action plan. You'll see that there's a timeline, that there's a measure of success, that you're creating SMART goals. We're not going to go too deep into that on today, because remember, my initial comments to you guys around this session is to how do you fine tune or begin to fine tune what you hear, what you see, and begin to go into a space using these 4 techniques. When you go into any space, and these 4 techniques will be with you, I will send these to you in a follow-up email for you to make use of, and then you can begin to use these along with, as a supplement to, the tools that you may be using. So when you were in that breakout room just now, or even before that, as an individual observer of the video, what did you observe using? Not all of them. If you want to just choose one technique, if someone wants to come off mute and just say, what technique did you bring into the space, and what did you observe using that technique?
I'll go.
Thank you.
I tried to use the unstructured observation, just to be able, as was trying to just watch the video and just kind of take open-ended notes. So
Very good. Did you observe anything?
yes.
You want to share at least one?
I shared it with my team and they forgave me. But one of the things I observed is when the little boy made one of his comments, and how what the comment was, and how that comment just open-endedly, when I was just thinking, that could have taken a different direction depending on how the other student perceived what he was asking her.
Exactly. And you were in room 1 breakouts. Did it say what room you were in when you were?
I apologize. I don't remember which exactly room I was in.
I understand. Thank you so much for coming off mute. I appreciate you for being brave to do that. Any others want to tell me some of the techniques that they use, or one of them, and what they observed? Hearing none, I'm going to go into question 2 on this, and then we're going to move into our 10-minute break. Which technique felt most natural to you to use when you were in the observation of that video? Which one felt like, this is common to you, this is natural to me, it wasn't challenging at all to me? Which one of them felt most natural to you to make use of?
For me, it was probably the unstructured one.
Why
It
is
just
that?
seems easy.
Yeah.
I don't know. Walking into the classroom, I feel like you kind of know what you want to see, and you kind of know where things should be. So if you're seeing kids running all over the room, if you're seeing like a mess everywhere, you're seeing that you don't have enough teaching materials, I feel like some of those things kind of stick out to you. And when you walk into a classroom, I feel like I don't always need a checklist to kind of know where things need to be in place. It's like I also want to make sure I'm honing in on the things that are most crucial. So the unstructured one seems like I can focus down on the biggest problem in the room instead of just specifically what I wanted to see.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing that. I appreciate you for coming off of mute and being brave to do that as well. Well, guys, we have made it to our 10-minute break. We're going to offer you a chance to grab another cup of coffee, do a bio break. And when we come back, we're going to go right back into our breakout rooms again. And we're going to talk a little bit more about what that looks like when we come back. But you guys have made it to 10 minutes of time. I look forward to coming back. Remember, when you come back, you're going to be in that same breakout room with your fellow peers from earlier to further and deepen the discussion just a little bit more. Awesome. I'll see you guys in 10 minutes at 11:18. See you then. And when you see that, go ahead and stop the recording. So as I mentioned before we went on break, once we gathered the data through our observations, we had some really great feedback from our colleagues and our peers in the work who came off mute and shared some of the techniques that they felt most comfortable with and ones that they used while they watched the video clip. Now, remember, this is just a snapshot in time when you go into these spaces most often. And sometimes it can look like the length of this video, sometimes 2 minutes, sometimes a split second, sometimes it seems like. And because you fine tune your skills, you're able to go in and your eyes are moving. They are assessing. You get to take mental notes. Sometimes you get so good at it, you don't even need a pen and paper because it's in your mind. You see it. You fine tune those skills of observation. So I appreciate a good tool. Don't get me wrong. I love it. But once again, I'm just going to mention it again. I want you guys to understand the importance of observation. When you are going into a space, what are you looking for? Most of your Michigan out of school time standards will tell you and give you a breakdown of what you should be looking for when you go into a space. If you're not familiar with the Michigan out of school time standards, in a follow-up email, I will send that document out to you as well. That is hugely essential to have in your space. If you are licensed, you already know the things that you should be looking for when you walk into a space. You know that your space should be safe. You're checking the outdoors, you're checking the indoors if you're licensed. So these tools of observation, just these 4 techniques that we've talked about and that you would get a follow-up email about will begin to strengthen your techniques and your skills that you already have. And if you are building your skills, these should be helpful to you as well. So we talked about taking that data from the observation, and we're looking at trends, we're looking at patterns, we're even looking at data from our last year observation. So if you are with the Weicker Center and you're using PQA, you know that you get the leading indicator report. And that report tells you what your data is all about and how you can make use of it to then create an action plan or a program improvement plan, as I will move forward saying the PIP. But if you want to do looking at more trends and more patterns and looking at that longitudinal data, you can take your leading indicator report from a couple of years back and look at that data as well to begin to find those patterns and those trends. I would also like to encourage you, because I mentioned the quantitative and the qualitative piece as well. Sometimes you just want to score it. You just want to do a 1 or 3 or 5, and you want to do a check mark. I suggest using that qualitative piece as well. Writing out those anecdotal evidence pieces of information to begin to understand what is that 1 saying? What is that 3 saying? What is the 5 saying? How is what you're hearing from not just your staff, but from your students and from that advisory committee? What are they saying? From that principal in your school building, if you're in a school building and district, what are they saying? So get all the pieces of information and begin to look for patterns and trends on how to begin to implement those to improve quality at your program. So we talked about some of the techniques that were brought into it, but now we're going to go into your breakout room again. So we're back from a break. Hopefully you got yourself something good to eat, coffee, some water, a bio break, whatever you needed to get through the last couple of minutes together. This is a Friday. We're running this race together. We're almost there, guys. Now, in this breakout session, if you'll notice here, I've added one extra person inside of the group. So we had a facilitator, we had the note taker, we had a person that was going to speak out. I know we didn't get to that last time where I heard from the groups itself, so we'll do that in this second round here. Kind of did the individual person talking last time from that breakout experience. But the next time, I just want to hear from the presenter from both of the breakout rooms. But I added the data analyst. So this person is going to ensure that the observations from each technique, the structured technique, the unstructured technique, focus, and objective are included in your discussion. So I was able to look into the chats, into the breakout rooms, and I saw some microphones moving. Some people were talking, some were chatting, some were not. In this facilitator, I want you to keep that focus, keep that conversation going. You're going to have another 8 or so minutes to get in there and have the conversation. If you need us to play that video again before we go out to this breakout, then I will lean on my colleague to do so and to play that video, the first portion of it anyways. So now that once again, we've explored the 4 observation techniques, you guys should have that document in your possession now. It was put in the chat box. If you do need it again, please let us know so we can drop it for you again. We kind of did just some practice around it, looking at a scene, a very small clip of time in Mr. Gregory's classroom from Abbott Elementary. So it's time to take that observation just one step further, guys. And in this breakout session, your group will combine your insights from the multiple observation techniques. Once again, the structured, unstructured, the focused, and the objective. And you're going to develop just a realistic action plan. So you should have received that as well. You're not going deep into this action plan. I say stick to exactly what is on that form and answer it exactly the way that you need it to be, the way that is listed there in the document. So you're going to just create a very simple action plan to improve a specific portion of that video. As a group, which one or all of these techniques would you make use of to improve something that you saw in that video clip? How would you improve it? What would be the action step? Who would you talk to? How would you implement it? I'm not asking that you get deep on the timeline part of it or the measure that right now. I just want you guys to have a discussion around which techniques, one or all, that you would use to improve what you saw and how Mr. Gregory, you guys should know by now that the interaction was between the teacher and the student. Now, some students were in there. If you notice what I noticed, there were some of the young folks that were communicating in their own way in that space as well. So if you need the video played again, we can do that. But I want you guys to use, once again, structured, unstructured, focus, and objective techniques, one or all. I would like all. This is 4, so I'm gonna make sure I have a 4 because I mentioned 4 things. You're going to identify some key insights. You're going to identify some of the strengths that you saw happening in the video, some of the challenges that you saw happening in the video. You're going to develop a targeted plan to improve the program or that classroom practice or program practice or activity that you saw based off of that video observation. So you're looking for strengths, you're looking for challenges, and how are you going to answer that? What did you bring into that space? So looking at small changes You can also go and start mentioning some resources as a group that you would use or that you have used, that you've used or currently using when a situation like the one we have seen takes place. Okay, so everyone understand? Are we good? Are we thumbs up? We're halfway understanding, or we've tanked? We good? All right, awesome. We're gonna go ahead and we're gonna go back. Okay, so I do believe that we have some requests for the video to be played again. So therefore, I am going to go on silent. And Larry, let me know if you need me to stop sharing so that you can go ahead and share that video. Is that a need, Larry?
Yes, please. You can stop sharing and then I'll share my screen.
Okay, awesome. There we go.
Aaron, go for it. Ice burr. I will accept ice burr. Now, there was an ice cube in this container before, right? Mom! Michael, why are you yelling in my class? Is your mom here right now? Mr. Eddie, you silly. No, I'm not. So there was an ice cube in here before, but now there's just water. What do we think happened to that ice cube? I love bingo. This isn't the first time Micah has disrupted my class. From what I understand, he's obsessed with a TV show about Australian dogs. Bluish or something. I don't know. It doesn't matter. What matters is I've tried everything to keep him in line and nothing works. It's gotten to the point where even his classmates are annoyed. Do you know how hard it is to annoy a first grader? Bingo, 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 bingo. Everybody, eyes up here, right? Bluey. The show is called Bluey. And now, rain is an example of water in its liquid state. Bluey is from down under. Micah, if you keep distracting your classmates, you're going to leave me with no other choice but to send you to the principal's office. Now, we already know that ice is a solid, but water is a... Have you ever been down under? Micah, I didn't want to have to do this, but you're leaving me with no choice. Gather your things. You're going to see Principal Coleman.
Awesome. Thank you, Larry, for sharing that. And I do believe Larry also has the breakout rooms set up to have you guys funnel right back into the ones that you were in. Remember, the change is that we have a data analyst this time who is going to just ensure the observation techniques from each of the techniques, which is structured, unstructured, focus, and objective, are included in the discussion. Awesome. Larry, let us know when the rooms are open.
Opening right now.
Thank you. Okay, your room should be opening. Go ahead and join. Very good. Hey, Beverly, I know that you, she's been assigned room 1? Okay. I know she came in and missed the first half. Thank you for being present. So we're going to have each person, presenter from each breakout room. Now, if you want to assist your presenter, feel free to raise your hand and come off mute and we can have you discuss as well. From room 1, we have Beverly. We have, I'm sorry, Chantra, if I said your name wrong, please forgive me. Then we have Darcel, Eric, Kidnat, and Lynn. If you are able to presenter from that group to come off mute and tell us the techniques that you used while observing and any suggestions, any recommendations on how you could improve what you saw. Because remember, this is the time now, as I talked before, is that you're taking techniques, these observation techniques and tools into a space, the structured, unstructured, the focus and the objective observation techniques. You're taking them into that space to use as a form of data to now create an action plan to improve what you have seen. So now that we're at the point where we've taken in these techniques into our observation, let's talk about the techniques, one or all, and then also talk about how you guys plan on improving that. So who is the presenter from room 1? Was one assigned?
We didn't really get to assigning it, but I guess I'll just do it.
You.
Okay. So for the techniques that we kind of observed, I mean, we didn't really specifically go over the techniques. We focused mainly on what the problems were inside of the room. So I feel like we kind of took both from a focused observation because we were really honed in on one, this kid is being disruptive in class right now. That was kind of the main issue of what we were seeing. Some of the things that we talked about to kind of get this situation back under control was splitting them up into individual pair groups. So we noticed that the teacher was in the front of the room trying to explain things. And one way for us to get some of that disruption to kind of calm down is to put them in groups and then we can isolate it a little bit. So instead of disrupting the whole class, you're only disrupting maybe one student, and we can kind of take care of that in a better basis. Another thing that we talked about was maybe setting the expectations so that the child knows exactly what they can expect and what they are supposed to do so that they're not confused when disciplinary actions come out. Another thing was we really wanted to make sure it was contained inside of the classroom because sending them out for making comments about Bluey is really not something the principal can handle. That's not something that she can write up. That's not something that's really actionable for her. So if we send them out, more than likely this kid's coming right back to our class.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
we want to make sure that he's getting the instruction that we need. We're not disrupting the principal or any of the administrative staffs from their regular duties, things that, are actionable for the organization or wherever you're at. And we want to make sure that the child is still getting what they need to get from the class. So taking those things into consideration, we were saying you could probably get this done in a day, set up for what we need for class time tomorrow. If we know that this is going to be an issue, how can we begin isolating you tomorrow so that the rest of the learning is not being interrupted?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. And I know oftentimes being in trainings on the other end of it, you just start having those conversations. So if you did not get the option or the opportunity to pick one of those roles, trust me when I tell you that that is fine. I would say though, that when you are at your site, at your center, that not so much that you pick roles, but that you do allow someone to be your note taker, because it's important to have someone who's solely on those minutes from the meeting and that they're capturing everyone's voice on that document. I think in the space of where you are having those staff meetings, everyone should have a voice at the table. Everyone that sits at that table should have a voice, but it is essential to make sure that you are going to have a note taker present so that you can have those notes to refer back to you past that meeting. So let's see, in room 2, let's see, anyone want to come off mute from room 2 and go ahead and have a conversation? And that would be from the group of Tiara, Pakina, if I'm messing your name up, Grace, for me. Marilyn, Lexi, and Shamil, anyone would like to come off mute and talk about some of the techniques they may have taken into that space, or ones that were just natural to you and organic to you that you may have used as far as observation, and then what are some suggestions or recommendations that you would use? First group, room one, Chef's Kiss. Thank you so much. Great information. Room two.
I can share for room two.
Thank you.
For us, we were kind of a little confused if you want us to go through all the techniques and everything, but we finally just agreed on focusing on just on focus, because it seemed easier for us to just for that technique. So we focus on the classroom management. So it was more on the teacher interaction, and we noticed how his comments didn't help the situation. It actually worsened the situation, because the kid thought his comment was funny. And we thought that his comment was a comment made for like kindergartens. We thought it would probably be something better, maybe more fitting for if he made that comment for an older group. So we thought that the action was for him to like sit in another kindergarten classroom and observe another teacher. And the second thing we also thought of as for him to go over classroom management for that grade specific, like kindergarten. So that way he'll be more equipped with techniques on how to deal with interruption from students.
Very good. Thank you, room two. I'll give you guys a
You're
shout out. Good job. Thank you for being brave, both of you, for coming off mute and sharing and just being involved in the conversation. I appreciate you guys so much. My colleague Larry is going to, I'm going to stop sharing. He's going to show the second part of the video. And so in this, I want to go back and I want to say that which one, because you didn't have to use all four when you went into this second breakout. You could have used one of the four or all of them. It would have been nice to use all of them, but it does really depend on the situation most often too, when to use some of these observation techniques. Some of them can be blended. Some of them can be left out. You can choose one. We've had in this conversation that there's just one that's just the unstructured one is just natural. If you've been doing this for a while, it is a natural occurrence. I, to this day, can go into any program and automatically my observation skills, they heighten and they kick in. I'm looking around, I'm checking things, and sometimes it's just such a part of me. It's not intentional. I don't mean to go into a space. I'm just trying to visit someone and say hello, but it's so in me that I look everywhere. If I do not see the Justice for All poster and where you're feeding kids, I'm not know what's going on. And I have to reel myself in because that's not my role any longer. And so I have to be careful, but that came from years of practice. That came from years of me honing those skills of observation, not just looking at the tool, but looking at licensing, looking at most standards, just knowing what's good for kids too, right? And hearing their voices and having those organic conversations with building and grounds even, because I mentioned, if you recall, that I go in, let's say we took that safety tool. I'm looking to see if you have an emergency preparedness plan. Well, what does that look like? That looks like in the action plan for you that you need to have a relationship with building and grounds so that you'll know which doors are locked after school that are normally open during the school day. So if there's a fire drill, how do you get your kids out? So it's a lot that goes into observation. You have to use your listening ears. Like I tell my 4-year-old grandkids, turn your listening ears on, look with your eyes, and just my charge to you is do not go in with judgment. In any space that you go in, you're looking for what you see. Now you have that data, hopefully both quantitative and qualitative. Now you have it. Now you can create an action plan and make those suggestions like we just did right here. I've taken all of your suggestions in this recording. I will send them back out through a follow-up email because some of them were spot on and hit the target, like from room 1, the one that you just mentioned, and some from room 2, you're going to see exactly what you just mentioned happen. And so my belief, and this is me, I'm rewriting the script for y'all from this video observation. So principal was in the room at the time that Mr. Gregory was in here having this engagement with the kids, and the principal was just trying to drop off some papers. And, you know, through her unstructured observation, she saw what happened, pulled him to the side in a one-on-one meeting. They talked about some strategies, and this is what came out of the strategies and the recommendations. Mr. Manley Jr., are you ready to share and see what, in my belief, that principal came up with for an action plan for Mr. Gregory's classroom? Sorry, guys, I love theater, so if I got a little dramatic there, I apologize. So she walked in, she saw this unstructured occurrence happen.
It melted and then turned into water. But we left that water in the sun and then it evaporated. Now, does anyone know? Huh? What? What was that, Bluey? Uh-huh. Yeah. Bluey, he's so crazy. Bluey is so funny. But she said that she knows what state the evaporated water is in. Does anyone else? Okay, Micah, come on up.
Now you know he don't know.
Okay. Now, is the water a solid, a liquid, or a gas?
Wrong.
Not quite, buddy, but that's okay. Thank you for trying. Now, does anybody else want to give it a go? Yes.
Awesome. So we saw that there was a change. There were some observations that took place. Some things were not the way that they should have been. Room 1 came up, I do believe, close to, let's make some changes in the immediate. Let's find a way to make a change based off of our observation, based off of the experience of what the interaction between that teacher and that student was happening that could change it right then and there. They're going back to another conversation that came from room one. Sometimes you don't have to send the kid out to the principal. I've been in day school. I've sent kids out to the principal my first year and they came back with a lollipop. I mean, things were not done. Things were not fixed. Things were not corrected. But sometimes you can take right there in your space, hey, you know what? I'm observing this student keeps saying something about this one main character. Mr. Gregory said, I have no idea who this character is. Me, if that were me in that position, I would have researched. And it looks like that's possibly what happened. Who is Bluey? Why does this young man keep saying something? And how can I still get him to engage with me in this same unit on science and not kick them out? Because when you move the child out of that learning environment, they're not learning. They're not getting anything from that activity. So when you are using that focus observation that was mentioned, using that unstructured, and it's not to take away from the structured observation. To me, that happens, and that is best on a programmatic level. But when you're talking about that individual response, and then to take that judgment out of it, once again, I have to really lean into that heavily, that we need to take the judgment out of any observations. So I thank you guys. We have 5 minutes left in our time. You have been gracious. I thank you for being in the space with me on this Friday. And before we leave, I am going to share my screen because there is a survey that I would love for you guys to take. So let me get back to my slides. Before we leave, there is a survey. QR code that you can zap with your phone, and there's also a link to the survey if you need that as well. Okay. I do thank you, but let me get back to that slide. And my mouse wants to just not act right now. There we are. Here is a QR code, and there's the link to the actual survey.
So you can drop the link in the chat.
I can put that link in the chat. Let me go ahead and grab that.
Thank you.
You're more than welcome. Give me a moment to get to it. My mouse, I have two screens and it does not want to move over to the, there we go. Give me a moment. Let me put that forward. And here's the link. Dropping that into the chat box right now. There you are. Here's a link to the survey, please. There we go. There we are. There's a link. Please take our survey. Give us your feedback. It is important that we receive that so we'll know how to tweak our trainings for the future. So once again, this is a QR code and the survey link. We thank you all so much for spending time with us on your Friday. Hopefully you'll grab something warm to drink, something nice and warm to eat. It's not the friendliest of days out here in Michigan. Thank you guys so much. I'll give a few more minutes for the QR code to stay up on the screen, and I will pop the link into the chat box one more time, just in case you didn't get a chance to grab it. Thank you guys so much for joining. Enjoy the rest of your day.